I'm just gonna say, if you like my outfit, you should read Lilliputian Living right now. And if you would like to color my outfit, then you should check out Curious Little Things. So every year I do a drawing prompt all through the month of October that is about tiny people, life on the miniature scale. So if you're here because you enjoy Hobbitcore or Cottagecore, or if you even know what Lilliputian means, I really think you should check this project out. I share it on Instagram and I share it on TikTok every year. And throughout the year, I work on painting some illustrations from those prompts. So if you enjoy fashion, if you enjoy slow living, if you enjoy the subversion of gender norms, I think you guys will really enjoy Lilliputian Living. And if you guys are looking for more tiny life, I have an entire watercolor webcomic called 7-Inch Kara, and it's all about a 7-inch tall little girl. So since a lot of you guys have been finding me from my outfit of the day shorts where I share outfits like this one, I thought you guys would really enjoy hearing how I go about thinking about the fashion that goes into Lilliputian Living, particularly 2013's Lilliputian Living, which is all about tiny fashion. Over the years, I have spent a lot of time exploring the tiny miniature Lilliputian world. So I have been working on Lilliputian Living for almost 8 years now. I have one 4-year volume of prompts and illustrations out. I also have a coloring book that has some of my favorites of these illustrations blown up. Some of them are even remastered. And I have some new illustrations in the back. And I wanted to also show you guys some of past year's Lilliputian Livings before we talk about this one. But we have explored all kinds of aspects of tiny living, from what people do with their time, to what kind of foods they eat, to how they repurpose human things, to the plants and animals that make their environment just a little bit better. We've explored the interiors of their homes, and we've explored the exterior of the world around them. And this year, I really wanted to explore Lilliputian fashion, the kind of clothes that they wear, how they make their clothes, how they gather those fibers, that sort of lifestyle, and industry. And I felt like this year was a perfect year for it because Hobbitcore and Cottagecore are really taking off. And I felt like this might be my chance to find the exact kind of nerdy people that I resonate with. So I am really looking forward to sharing 2023 Lilliputian Living with you guys and talking a little bit about Lilliputian fashions. Before we get into it, I do want to share that I organized a lot of my thoughts, a lot of my ideas, and a lot of my inspiration over on my Pinterest. I have a board of Lilliputian fashions that I've been collecting for several years now that made it easier for me to find inspiration when I needed inspiration. So you guys can see I have a lot of different ideas on here. Some of these I'll end up using. A lot of them were just there for inspiration, just there for vibes, just there to kind of get me started on the right foot. But it kind of serves as like a mood board and a place where I can throw the ideas as they come to me. Sometimes I'll search Pinterest for ideas. Sometimes I will pin ideas from shops and from other sites. But it's all just kind of grist for the inspiration mill. For a lot of these, I also spent a lot of time researching the process itself. Like we have weaving and we have arm knitting and we have collecting fibers, and all of that required some research on my part. I also have an interest, although I don't practice it anymore, in sewing and fiber arts myself, and I have several friends who knit and crochet. So they were a big part of my inspiration behind this year's Lilliputian Living, and I hope that they can see in this year's set of illustrations my appreciation for what they do and my affection for them, because I love to use art as a way to really communicate how I feel about people and how important they are, and you know, hopefully that comes across. But you guys can see There's a lot of like Nordic and Celtic inspiration. There's a lot of larger homespun sort of fibers. There's a lot of nature, flower, plants, and animal inspiration. Those are all the kind of vibes that I've been working into both 7-inch Kara and Lilliputian Living ever since I started 7-inch Kara way back in 2012. So I am really looking forward to sharing this year's set of prompts with you guys. Every year I do Lilliputian Living in a Strathmore visual journal. Here are all of the thumbnail sketches that I developed while working on this year's prompts. And we start off with Kara and her mom sewing. We move on to a tailor fitting a young customer for some new clothing. We then have a cobbler fitting the customer for some brand new shoes. And every year I try to make sure I include a diverse cast of characters. Here we have a weaver doing some traditional weaving. And part of this challenge is that it has to be done every night. Here we have some foragers and their pet rats collecting feathers and tufts of fur. We have a scrap picker going through various scraps and determining the quality of the scraps. We have, this would basically be like macrame or friendship bracelets. So these would be used for belts. These would be used for scarves and for sashes and for cords and ties. We have some arm knitting going on here. And this is a year that I really had to heavily reference, not just what they're wearing, but what I'm depicting. So we have here a knitting machine cranking out a whole lot of knitted material very quickly. Here we have, this one is so cute. It's a fabric and notions store. Look at the wall of buttons. Isn't that adorable? I can't wait to paint this one. This is going to be a lot of fun to paint. We have a dyer dyeing various materials. Then we move on to fashion. So here is children's fall fashion. Here is men's fall fashion. Then next up, we have women's fall fashion. And then finally, non-binary and ungendered clothing fall fashion. Because, you know, fashion belongs to everybody. And that was something that I worked throughout this year's series. Here's winter fashions with a lot of knitwear, including knitwear on our kitten. Then we have men's winter fashion where they're going out and they're collecting food. Women's winter fashion, which is, you know, designed for work, feeding the birds, feeding the sparrows, like that cute little sparrow right there. And then we have non-gendered fashion. So with winter, I was thinking like looser fitting clothing that can trap a lot of air, and that will kind of allow a lot of warmth to stay around the body. So I already showed you guys the Pinterest board that I put together collecting things. Here is spring children's fashions with them chasing chicks and chicks chasing them. Then we have a man and his pet weasel going out and foraging for food. We have a young woman dressed for like May Day, surrounded by wildflowers. And then we have our non-gendered, non-binary fashions where someone is carrying a big, beautiful bouquet of flowers. I can't wait to paint that one as well. So for summer, I wanted to do some flower fashion. So we had a magnolia dress with a dress made out of magnolia petals. We have swimwear. We also have like summer, midsummer festival type clothing. And we also have clothing designed for going outside and playing and having a good time, because one of the big things about Lilliputian fashion is you should be able to move around in it. Then we have specialty clothing like extreme cold, extreme winter conditions, like this coat. We have extreme heat, like this outfit designed for the heat and humidity of Southeast Louisiana. We also have rain gear, like this outfit inspired by traditional Japanese rain gear, which was made out of straw. And then finally, we end on wedding apparel. And I went for a really big statement dress because for Lilliputians, the more of a single fabric you could get a hold of and afford to use, the more it would be worth. And then I wanted to share some of the underdrawings and the sketches with you guys, as well as how they compare against the finished inks. So my process is I will start with a little thumbnail doodle the day before, and I will also sketch it out using red lead the day before. And this is the don't break the chain method. So that way I am focusing on inking that day's illustration and sharing it to social media, and then sketching the next day's illustration. This is really helpful because sometimes I have a migraine and I can only do so much. Sometimes we are doing a show that weekend and I'm not able to get as much done as I would like to. And then for some of these illustrations, I went back on later days and added in more detail, or I added in more shading. That's why the flip through, which was done after I'd completed the whole month, looks a little bit different than the nightly check-ins. So these photos were taken each night after I finished each sketch. So one of the fun things to me about Lilliputian Living is this provides the base line work for later field tests when I'm testing out watercolors. And what I'll do is I scan these. I will then print them out as blue lines on a higher quality watercolor paper. I will re-pencil it, re-ink it, and then paint on top of it. So you guys may see some of these again, or you may have already seen some of these. And if there is a favorite illustration that you would like to see in color, let me know. And I'll try to prioritize that because I love sharing my art with you guys, and I love being able to share art that you guys will enjoy. So while I did share my Pinterest board with you guys, for each individual day, I would reference specific things. So like this was a Cento knitting machine, for example. For the fabric shop, I looked up different fabric shops and then tried to transpose it. What would it look like if it were miniature? What would it look like if it were tiny? What sort of things would a salesperson need to have on hand? Same goes for dye. What kind of everyday items can be repurposed in miniature scale to facilitate the act of dyeing? What would they need to be able to accomplish this task? Also, I love working plants and animals into Lilliputian Living. If you guys don't know me, I love animals and I love drawing animals. And a big theme of my work is this love and appreciation for nature and living with nature and not fighting against it and not acting like we have to take over everything and that we have to take so much more than we need. I love the little watch fob detail pinned to her skirts as well. How cute is that? So these are themes that I'm always working into my work, but it is particularly apparent with Lilliputian Living where I get to really kind of go ham with it and really just kind of lean into it. And I love taking inspiration from fantasy. I love taking inspiration from other cultures and kind of weaving it into this gestalt where we have this diverse, tiny society with people who have come from all over the world, and they might live individually, or they might live in little villages, or they might live in like communities in like a library or a mall, or even in a hospital. And they all bring some of that background, and they're all able to share some of that. And it's just been such a delightful project, and I love being able to work on it. And I can only do it in the month of October because it basically, as hard as I try for it not to take over my entire October, it tends to take over my entire October. And I don't even go as in-depth as some people do. Some people will end up really spending a lot of time in September creating these really, really detailed sketches, and then they just focus on inking. I needed it to be a little bit more manageable, but also a way for me to create and share art every day. So one of the rules of Lilliputian Living is I can erase if it's in the red line stage, but I can't add any whiteout. I can't use any correctional fluid. It is just straight up inks on the page, which means if I mess something up, if I make a mistake, if my hand slips, I had to figure out a way to fix it or live with it, which is a really important skill to have to make peace with your art when you did your best, and to just kind of let it move forward, whether you're gonna, paint it and make some different choices later on, or you're just going to accept that you've made some mistakes and it's not perfect, but you're ready to make more art, rather than just getting forever caught up in trying to refine one piece over and over again. And I've also shared, I think, every year of Lilliputian Living with you guys in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes I did day by day, step-by-step tutorials. Some days I just talked about the materials that I was going to be using. Some years I just shared a snippet of every day of the month with you guys like we're doing this year. But I've been able to share this project with you guys for the past 7 years. And represents a tremendous amount of work, but I am so glad that I could share it with you guys, and I'm so glad that you guys could be part of this journey with me. And I hope you'll join me next year for our final Lilliputian Living, which will, result in us being able to put out the second volume of Lilliputian Living. So I can't wait to share that with you guys. I'm really glad you guys could join me for this year's Lilliputian Living. If you'd like to order a copy of Volume 1, you can find it in the Netta shop, and Curious Little Things is in there as well. I have one more year of prompts left to do before I can release Volume 2, but you guys can keep an eye on my progress by following me on Instagram and on TikTok, because I make it a point to share my day-to-day progress when I'm working on Lilliputian Living over on those two sites. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this sketchbook tour and for allowing me to share some of my world and my inspirations with you guys.